Hello there. Today I'll be sharing my reflection on the Supreme Court case, People of the Philippines versus Jamarito S. Soliman, decided on April 25, 2023. This case involves online libel under Section 4C4 of Republic Act 10175, also known as the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012. I'll discuss what the case is about, the facts, the legal issues, and some of my personal takeaways. So, this case is all about proper imposition of penalties for online libel. Soliman was charged with libel committed through Facebook, meaning he allegedly posted false and malicious statements about another person named Waldo Carpio that damaged Carpio's reputation. The trial court found Soliman guilty and was imposed a fine of 50,000 pesos. The people of the Philippines, however, argued that the penalty should have been 1 degree higher than the standard penalty under the revised penal code because of Section 6 of RA 10175 that specifically states that crimes committed using information and communications technology should have a penalty 1 degree higher. Essentially, the prosecution believed that imprisonment should have been imposed instead of a fine. The Supreme Court's task was to determine whether the trial court and the Court of Appeals acted correctly in imposing a fine only, or whether this constituted a grave abuse of discretion. The case is particularly interesting because it touches on multiple important legal principles. One being the application of RA 10175, the discretion of trial courts in imposing penalties, and the protection of the accused from double jeopardy. So, what are the facts of the case? The facts are actually quite detailed. On January 23, 2018, Soliman allegedly posted statements on Facebook targeting Waldo Carpio, claiming that Carpio was delaying the release of his sanitary and phytosanitary clearance, or what is otherwise known as SPS permit. The post contained very strong language, accusations of favoritism, and claims that Carpio was obstructing shipments of onions and rice. The RTC reviewed the case and concluded that Soliman's statements were false and malicious, intended to expose Carpio to public hate and ridicule. Soliman was found guilty beyond reasonable doubt and was sentenced to pay a fine of 50,000 pesos. The court did not impose imprisonment, citing Administrative Circular 08-2008, which allows judges to exercise discretion in deciding whether a fine alone would be best or serve justice depending on the circumstances of each case. In this case, Soliman paid the fine and did not appeal. The government, however, filed a petition with the Court of Appeals, arguing that the penalty should have been imprisonment 1 degree higher, as mandated under Section 6 of RA 10175. The CA denied the petition, holding that the imposition of a fine was only within the RTC's discretion, and that the increasing the penalty would violate Soliman's right against double jeopardy. Now, what are the issues of the case? There was one main issue before the Supreme Court. Did the trial court, and subsequently the Court of Appeals, commit grave abuse of discretion when it imposed a fine only for Soliman's conviction for online libel? Within this overarching question, there were sub-issues. 1. Whether imposing a fine instead of imprisonment was legally permissible under RA 10175 and the revised penal code. 2. Whether increasing the penalty through a petition would violate Soliman's constitutional right against double jeopardy. And number 3, whether Administrative Circular 08-2008 could be applied in an online libel case, even though RA 10175 was enacted later. And what is the final ruling of the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court affirmed the Court of Appeals decision. It ruled that the RTC did not commit grave abuse of discretion in imposing a fine only. The court also explained that the petition from the government, if granted, would have violated Soliman's right against double jeopardy, because the RTC's decision was already final and enforceable. In other words, increasing the penalty after the fact would effectively put Soliman in jeopardy a second time for the exact same offense. Substantively, the court also clarified that Section 6 of RA 175 does not automatically require imprisonment. It only mandates that the penalty for online libel should be 1 degree higher than the corresponding penalty under the revised penal code. Since RPC allows fines as alternative penalties to imprisonment, the RTC's imposition of a 50,000 peso fine was also legally valid. The court also further applied Article 75 of RPC, which allows fines to be increased or reduced by degrees. And they also noted that the imposed fine was well within the legally allowable range. Additionally, the court explained that the Administrative Circular 08/2008 does not conflict with RA 10175. Judges may still consider the circumstances for each case, such as Soliman's immediate deletion of the post and his apologies, to determine whether a fine alone would serve justice. In this case, the fine was sufficient to reflect the seriousness of the offense, while also recognizing mitigating factors. The Supreme Court ultimately denied the petition, affirming the RTC and CA decisions, and confirmed that Soliman's fine of 50,000 pesos was appropriate. So, my takeaways and learning from this case, I have definitely learned several key lessons. First, the importance of judicial discretion. Courts are not merely technical enforcers of laws. They evaluate circumstances, intentions, and mitigating factors to impose penalties that best serve justice. And as we can see in this case, Soliman's immediate deletion of the post and his apology were significant in deciding that the fine was sufficient. Second, the case also illustrates the legal principle of double jeopardy. Once a court decision becomes final, the government cannot seek to increase the penalty, because doing so would violate the accused's constitutional rights. This principle protects individuals from repeated illegal harassment for the same offense. Third, this case also highlights how RA 10175 works along the revised penal code. While the law raises penalties for crimes committed online, it does not remove alternative penalties like fines, and the degree increase applies to both imprisonment and fines. Understanding how modern laws interact with older statutes is crucial for both legal practitioners and citizens. Lastly, I also realized the power and responsibility that come with online speech. Social media posts have serious legal consequences, and especially when they harm another person's reputation. Laws like RA 10175 aim to balance freedom of expression with accountability. Overall, this case reinforces the need for fairness, proportionality, and awareness of legal consequences in both judicial and in judicial decision-making and online behavior. In conclusion, People versus Soliman teaches us that the law carefully balances punishment, discretion, and constitutional rights. The case is a reminder for all of us that while the internet is a platform for free expression, it also comes with legal responsibilities. Courts must weigh intent, context, and mitigation to achieve justice, while us citizens must be mindful of the limits of online speech. That's all from me. Thank you so much.